The pregnancy test wasn't mine, but it was obvious. I found it in our master bathroom's trash can, buried under a jumble of tissues and an empty shampoo bottle. The two solid pink lines were as clear as day, and I stood there, frozen, trying to process the reality that my wife Molieri hadn't told me we weren't trying for a baby. In fact, she had been using every excuse imaginable. Headaches, late nights at work, a need for space, to avoid any form of intimacy with me for months. It was like a bolt of lightning. There was evidence of something much darker than a pregnancy. My mind raced with fury and disbelief as I held the test, my chest tightening to the point that I couldn't breathe. I knew Mia was meticulous. She was always thinking 3 steps ahead. If she had let this slip, it would have been because she didn't think I'd find it, or maybe she was arrogant enough to think I wouldn't figure it out. I refrained from confronting her immediately because it would have been too soon. Simple no, I had to be cunning about this. Mia was a master manipulator. If I confronted her with suspicions, she would twist the situation so that I was the one apologizing. I didn't give her the satisfaction she wanted, so I returned the test to its original location, carefully rearranging the trash to make it appear unaltered. I stepped out of the bathroom as if nothing had transpired, even though my entire world had just turned upside down. My hands were trembling as I sat down at the kitchen table. While patiently waiting for her to come downstairs, I pretended to scroll through my phone. When she finally did, her hair still damp from the shower, she gave herself a coffee and began scrolling through Instagram as if nothing was wrong. I couldn't believe it. She had the gall to act as if nothing was wrong. Then, I stumbled across the most damning evidence of her betrayal. I wanted to yell, rip the mug of coffee out of her smug, oblivious hands, and demand answers, but I restrained myself. Not yet, but I mustered up a saintly smile and said, "You look like you slept well today. It was a long day at work." Molly glanced up at me, her expression unreadable, before shrugging her shoulders and going on about her usual routine of meetings and deadlines. The casual way she said it made my stomach turn, but I knew she wasn't just being dishonest. She was good at it. If she thought I was an ignorant husband who would let her get away with anything, she was mistaken. I would uncover her hidden agenda, and she would regret it. That night, I lay awake listening to her calm breathing as she slept next to me, oblivious to the unrest she had unleashed. I wanted to believe there was a harmless reason for the pregnancy test, but I knew there had to be more to it than that. By morning, I had a strategy. I would start small, observe her, and look for. She acted as if nothing was wrong during breakfast, even kissing me on the cheek, which felt like an insult. And I played along, smiling and laughing at her jokes. But I couldn't help but notice her tight grip on her phone, as if it were glued to her hand. Usually, she would leave it on the counter or the coffee table. It was like she was performing a sick little performance to keep up appearances. Yesterday, she brought the table with her to the bathroom, which was unusual given how long she would spend there. Sometimes 15 or 20 minutes. I asked casually as she emerged from the restroom for the 3rd time that morning, "You seem to have been using the restroom quite a bit lately." She paused for a moment to process the question, then laughed it off. "It's probably just some stomach issues. Maybe from that sushi we had the other night." Actually, it was a lie. We hadn't eaten sushi in weeks. I nodded and smiled, pretending to purchase it, but deep down, my determination became stronger. I decided to delve deeper that day while she was at work. I'm not usually one to snoop, but this was different. It wasn't paranoia, it was self-preservation. I began by going through the trash, poring over every piece. To my surprise, I found another clue. A crumpled receipt from a boutique in the next town. The receipt was dated 2 days ago and listed items that weren't in our house. The receipt for the luxury candle, silk lingerie, and men's cologne sent shivers down my spine. It was clear that she hadn't bought them for me, but who or what was behind the purchase? The pregnancy test, the unexplained purchases, and the endless late nights at work were all building up to something I wasn't ready to admit just yet. Later that night, as we sat on the couch watching a mindless reality show, I asked her, "So, who's the cologne?" I held up the receipt and watched Mallory's face as she asked, "What are you talking about?" For a split second, her mask slipped, her eyes widened, and her mouth opened as if to say something. Then, she recovered and laughed as if I had told a stupid joke. "Oh, that's for my boss's birthday. The whole team pitched in for a gift. I didn't think it was a big deal, so I didn't mention it." I smiled as if I believed her, and I leaned back in my chair, letting out a relieved sigh. Molieri relaxed, sinking into the couch with a relieved sigh. She had no clue that I was up to no good. My goal had shifted from catching her to ensuring that she couldn't get out of this mess when the truth came out. The next step in my plan was to confirm. Her late nights at the office had been too frequent and convenient, and I wanted to see where she was really going. I followed her the next morning after she left for work, doing something I never thought I'd do. My instincts told me that she had secrets and that I was done giving her the benefit of the doubt if she wanted to play games. I waited behind an old pickup truck down the street. First, I thought everything was normal. Molieri drove out of the driveway in her sleek white SUV, coffee in hand, looking every inch the polished professional. I followed her downtown route, expecting her to go to her office as she always claimed to. Instead, she took a surprising turn and ended up at a charming cafe on the outskirts of town. My heart raced as I parked a block away, silently observing her every move. Stepped out of the car in an outfit that was way too nice for work. She wore a fitted dress that I'd never seen before and heels that clicked against the pavement. My stomach turned as I realized this wasn't just a coffee run. With an air of effortless confidence, she walked into the cafe like she owned it. Shortly after, a tall man in business casual joined her. They sat down at a corner table, leaning on each other's shoulders, laughing and chatting like nothing was wrong. Their expression changed to one I hadn't seen in months. I clutched the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I restrained myself because I knew that losing my temper wouldn't get me the evidence I needed. Instead, I pulled out my phone, snapped a few photos, my hands trembling, as I zoomed in to capture their intimate rendezvous. They lingered there for nearly an hour, enjoying lattes and what appeared to be a pastry. When they finally left, I maintained my distance and followed them as they made their way back to their cars. The man, in particular, stood out, reached out, gently brushed a strand of hair from Mallory's face before leaning in to kiss her cheek. Instead of pulling away, she lingered, smiling up at Ed as if he were her entire world. Observing her so carefree and intimate with him hit me like a ton of bricks, but I kept my cool and focused. This wasn't over, not even close. I drove home in silence, my mind racing with questions about who he was. I did not yet have all the answers, but I did know that Molieri had underestimated me. When the time came, I would make sure that she regretted it. When Molieri returned home that evening, she was beaming as if she were a loving wife who wanted to surprise her husband. She set the takeout bags on the kitchen counter and kissed me on the cheek, as if she hadn't spent the morning laughing over. Her eyes gleamed with self-satisfaction as she pulled out boxes of barbecue ribs and mac and cheese, and she chirped, "I got your favorite. I thought we could have a nice dinner together because you've been working so hard recently." I smiled and kept my tone light, but I felt sick to my stomach. Mel thought she had me fooled into eating her ribs and smiling like a devoted husband while she played house. But tonight I wasn't acting foolish. I was laying the groundwork for a dramatic break. I observed her intently during dinner as she attempted to distract herself by asking me about my day and making jokes about her boss's incompetence. It seemed like she was trying to hide some guilt that she wasn't ready to face. I tried to match her energy, laughing and even sharing a story about a bothersome coworker. As she relaxed, I felt more confident in my next move. After we finished eating, I emptied the plates while she leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. I wiped my hands on a dish towel in a casual manner. I spoke up, my voice steady and my face neutral, and she glanced up, her smile wavering ever so slightly. "It's not that bad, besides I'm doing it for us, right, building our future," she said, her expression betraying her lack of interest. "Oh, you know how it is, same old grind, deadlines, client meetings, the usual, must be tough juggling everything. I mean, late nights, early mornings, it's impressive." Second, but it was sufficient to validate everything I already knew. Her hold on the phone became tighter, and she concealed her reaction with a laugh. "Oh, it's just a networking thing. Nothing exciting." I leaned against the counter, folding my arms, and said, "Interesting. You've never mentioned it before. Networking sounds cozy." Her eyes narrowed slightly, and her smile thinned. "Ethan, what's with the third degree?" she asked. "It was just a work thing. Why are you making it sound weird?" "Not at all." I lifted my hands in mock surrender, curious, and she continued. Carefully observed me, clearly trying to determine if I was on to her. After a tense moment, she shrugged and returned to her phone, saying something about how I've been acting paranoid recently. I wasn't paranoid. I was methodical that night. After Moeller went to bed, I stayed up reviewing the photos I'd taken earlier. Each one was a slash through any hope I had that this was all just a misunderstanding. The vivid details of her smile, the way she leaned in close to him, and the kiss were all there, captured in vivid detail. Little did she know that I was building my suspicions, piece by piece, making sure there was no way out when the truth finally came out. I slept that night not from anger but from plotting my next move. Amy had spent months creating her web of lies, but she had no idea I was going to shatter it. She had believed she was untouchable and smarter than me, but that would prove to be her biggest mistake. The following day, I decided to step up my game. Watching and waiting had served its purpose, but now I needed answers, and I wasn't getting them from anyone. I wasn't going to sit back and let Molieri control the narrative any longer. I needed to dig deeper, and I installed a small tracking app on her laptop while she was at work. Molly wasn't very tech-savvy, and her passwords were laughably predictable. Within minutes, I had access to her email and calendar. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but pride didn't matter anymore. The truth was, her email inbox was quite revealing, with messages from someone named Luke among the usual work correspondence. Luke was more than just a coworker or casual friend. He was the man from the cafe, as revealed by his playful tone, inside jokes, and frequent meetings. Her calendar, which was filled with work meetings, project deadlines, and personal events, was also very organized. One entry, for example, that caught my eye was Friday at 3 p.m. During Dr. Carlson's prenatal checkup, my heart froze. It became clear that she wasn't just pretending to be pregnant. She was actively manipulating her pregnancy in my absence. The betrayal hit me like a freight train, but I refused to let my anger consume me. Rather, I saw this as a chance to seize control of the situation. I wasn't prepared to confront her just yet, not until I could finally knock her down with a devastating blow. Later that day, I followed up on the next piece of the puzzle, Luke's email signature. I decided to look into his company and title so I could learn more about him. I quickly found out that he was a senior consultant at a high-end firm, married with 2 kids. That detail was a blessing because it meant that I wasn't just dealing with Mallory's lies anymore. Luke had something to lose as well. If he thought he could just walk into my life, ruin my marriage, and then disappear, he was about to find out how wrong he was. By the time I got home that evening, I had already started planning my revenge when she walked through the door. She threw her bag on the counter, her feet stomping on the hardwood floor. "Hey," she said, looking for a bottle of water in the fridge. "How was your day?" I asked with a casual smile, maintaining a casual tone. "My day has been pretty dull. What about yours?" She hesitated, her head still buried in the fridge. "The usual meetings all day. I'm wiped." I tried to keep my voice steady, but she straightened up, glanced at me briefly, and then shook her head in disapproval. It was like pulling teeth not to laugh at the lies she uttered. Her confidence was contagious. I felt a twinge of envy as I forced a smile and asked if it would be all right if I headed out on Friday afternoon to run some errands. She seemed oblivious that I had seen her calendar and knew about her appointment, but I watched as she settled into her couch, mindlessly scrolling through her phone, as if nothing had transpired. On Friday, I was all set. I got dressed for work as usual, and she kissed me goodbye as if everything was fine, as if she weren't hiding anything from me. I smiled back, waved her off, and got to work by 2:30. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I realized she was wrong. So very wrong. Now, it wasn't just about exposing her. It was about making sure she never forgot what happens when you betray someone who trusted you. At exactly 2:58, Mallory's white SUV pulled into the lot. She stepped out and nervously looked around, as if she knew she was doing something she shouldn't have been doing. The building was small and unassuming, situated between a pharmacy and a dental office. I wasn't sure what to expect, but my gut told me this was the moment everything would fall into place. I waited in the car, my gaze fixed on the entrance. A steady stream of women came and went, some alone, others with partners or friends. As I approached the entrance, I noticed Luke standing there with a pressed shirt, slacks, and a takeout cup of coffee. It seemed like any other casual Friday. However, when Em caught sight of him, her face lit up in a way that made my stomach turn. She approached him and they embraced in a long, meaningful embrace, the kind that revealed a lot about their relationship. I clutched the steering wheel, trying to remain calm, but witnessing their arrival at the clinic together was like a final straw. They were united and believed they were untouchable, but that was not the case. As soon as they entered, I followed them, avoiding the main entrance because I wasn't prepared to confront them just yet. Instead, I snuck inside through a delivery door that was propped open near the back, probably used by staff. The hallway was empty except for the faint sound of voices coming from down the hall, which I followed to A. Peering through the partially open door, I witnessed them seated side by side, engaged in conversation with the doctor. May sported a smile, her hand resting on her stomach, while the doctor flipped through charts. Luke, in his proud partner role, looked on and asked questions as if this were the happiest moment of his life. My blood boiled, but I restrained myself. Rather than exposing them there and then, I took out my phone and began recording their every move. Words, gestures, and smiles. Every detail was captured on tape. I was able to escape the clinic unnoticed, my heart racing with adrenaline and rage. In my car, I watched the footage over and over again, fueling my fire. Now, it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about humiliation and destroying the little fantasy world they had constructed behind my back. By the time I got home, I had a plan. Mimi would pay for what she had done, not only to me but to herself and Luke. Luke wouldn't let her off the hook either. I wasn't content to simply confront them. I was determined to. The weekend arrived like a quiet storm, the kind that everyone feels but no one can predict. Em pretended everything was fine, smiling and chatting, and even suggesting we go out to dinner on Saturday night. I pretended to be the ideal loving husband, but I was actually hatching a plot that she wouldn't see coming. Our first move would be to go to a posh Italian restaurant downtown, the kind with cleat tables and expensive wine. She wore a vivid red dress. I let her act like a wife for the moment, even though I'd been feeling angry about our upcoming marriage. As we were halfway through our meal, her fork twirled strands of linguine as I struck, saying, "You know, I've been thinking a lot about our future." Moeller looked up, her smile faltering for a brief moment before she recovered, and I wondered what had brought her tears. With that in mind, I relaxed into my chair and maintained a casual tone. "You seem distracted lately, like something's been on your mind. I figured maybe it's time we talked about it." Ethan, I don't know what she was getting at, but she blinked, taken aback. "I've just been busy with work," she repeated, nodding thoughtfully. "All those late nights at the office, networking meetings, trips out of town. It's all just work. You seem to be trying to convey something, but it sounds like you don't trust me." I lean forward and speak in a low measure tone. "I trust you to always look out for yourself, to cover your tracks, to think you're smarter than everyone else in the room. But here's the thing. I'm not as stupid as you think I am." Her face went white as I extracted my phone from my pocket. She didn't even need to unlock it. I held it up so she could see the thumbnail. As I watched her world crumble before my eyes, a low but poisonous hiss escaped her lips. "What the fuck?" she said, her tone almost mocking. "I followed you, Mia. I saw everything. The clinic, Luke, the little prenatal pep talk with the doctor. You've been busy, haven't you?" Her eyes darted around the restaurant, and panic crept into her features. "Keep your voice down," she whispered, her tone sharp. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said. I leaned in closer, my voice barely above a whisper. "Now let me guess. You were. Here's the deal." I kept my voice calm but strident. I had everything I needed, photos, videos, emails, you name it. So you had two options. Either come clean right now and we figure it out, or you were planning to pin the baby on me while playing happy family and sneaking off with Luke whenever you felt like it. Mailer looked powerless for the first time in months, and it was intoxicating. Find out what happens next or two. I leave the restaurant and send everything to Luke's wife. What will happen? I imagine her face will be a mix of fury and fear, and for the first time, her mask will fall. What I see is a cold, calculated liar who believed she could control everything. In a low, poisonous voice, she hissed. I tried to smile and lean back, but Moeller sat there, frozen, her carefully orchestrated composure crumbling before my eyes. She looked around the restaurant as if looking for an escape route, but there was none. Finally, she whispered, her voice sharp and biting, "This is my life. You can't just have your life." I interrupted her, my voice still calm but with enough steel to cut through her excuses. Laughing. The candle light seemed to flicker against her now pale face, and her red lipstick had smudged. I thought it was our life together, my dear, but it's clear that you've been busy with something else. I believe it's time for me to know the whole story. Her clenched jawline and narrowed eyes betrayed her desire to tell the truth. Yes, I have been seeing Luke, but it's not what you think. Her laughter drew the attention of a nearby table, but it wasn't what I expected. Are you kidding me? She asked, her voice trailing off. I followed you to the clinic and saw you with him. I'm having his child. For God's sake. The realization hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't just trying to protect herself. She wanted to punish me. Her expression darkened, and the panic in her eyes replaced it with something colder. You don't understand it, Luke. He's different. He understands me in ways you never could. You've been so boring, Ethan. I needed more of that. The knife in the chest wasn't denied, and she looked almost defiant. I sat back and nodded slowly as her words sank into monotony. I kept my voice low, wondering why she was twisting things. She snapped her fingers, her voice rising despite her earlier attempt to keep quiet. I needed something new and exciting, and you don't seem to be anything like the perfect saint. You've been distant and caught up in your... She remained silent, her face turning red with rage. I took out my phone once more, tapped the screen to bring up the recording from the clinic, and I held her as we spoke. You want to talk about being distant? How about you shutting me out for months, lying to my face, and plotting to have me raise another man's child? Is that exciting enough for you? I said, my voice trembling with anger. This is my personal insurance policy. If you attempt to manipulate this conversation or deceive me again, I will respond swiftly and without hesitation. Mallory's confidence crumbled as she realized the truth, and she whispered softly, but her voice wavered. She said, "Try me," with an icy tone. You believed you could manipulate me, hoping I would never figure it out. Now we're here, so here's what's going to happen. You'll tell me everything and then you'll... As I stood up, I slipped my phone back into my pocket. Molieri, take your time, but don't take too long. You're on borrowed time now and I'm not feeling very happy about it. If you don't figure out how to fix this, Luke's life will explode, your reputation will burn to the ground, and this fairy tale of your Zen will catch fire. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes and her hands gripping the edge of the table as if she were trying to keep herself from falling apart. I couldn't speak a word. Kindly, I left the restaurant without waiting for her response. The chilly night air brushed against my face as I stepped outside. It had been months since I felt in control, but now it was my turn. Upon returning home, I wasted no time in pouring myself a drink, sitting down at the kitchen table, and began to plot out the final stages of my strategy. She had mistaken the dinner confrontation for the climax, but she was unaware of the lies she had told. As soon as she stepped through the door, her heels clacking against the hardwood, I was prepared. However, she hesitated upon seeing me seated at the table, composed and holding my drink. Her mask had returned to its false composure, a smile that betrayed someone who believed they could still maintain control. You walked out on me, she said, her voice sharp, setting her purse on the counter, humiliating Ethan. Good, I replied simply. Her jaw clenched as she asked, "Are we really doing this?" I made a cold, bitter sound that made her flinch, and she said, "Yes, I made a mistake, but I'm still your wife. We can fix this. Moeller, you lied, cheated, and attempted to force me to raise another man's child. There's no way to fix this." She crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes. "If you want to end things, that's fine, but let's not act like you're an innocent victim. Ethan, you've been distant for months. You stopped trying to communicate with me and stopped paying attention. If you had paid more attention, none of this would have happened." There was deflection, gaslighting, and a shameless attempt to make her betrayal my fault. However, I refused to fall for it and instead stood tall and met her glare directly. "It's funny that you say that, but I was actually quite calm when I spoke. Like when you skipped work to meet Luke, or when you gave him that cologne as a team gift, or my favorite, when you walked into that clinic. Hey Molly, I've been keeping an eye on things during your prenatal appointment." When she started to argue, I interrupted her. I didn't want things to get out of hand, so I paced slowly around the kitchen. Then I stopped pacing and reached for my phone. "After all, you can't just walk away from this like nothing happened. How come?" Holding it up again, I showed her the screen. It contained all of Mallory's photos, videos, and emails. And guess what? Luke's wife could see them all with just one click. Her eyes widened in horror as Ethan interrupted, saying, "You can't see this unless you want to make it easy for me." Her voice barely budged as she finally asked, "What do you want?" Her tone was sharp and unfiltered. "No more lies, no more games," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to see this." She shook her head in frustration and her eyes welled up with tears. "You're being unreasonable. We can work this out." My voice rose for the first time. "You don't get to call me unreasonable. You lied, you cheated, and you tried to trap me in your mess. This is your doing, not mine. Either leave or I'll send everything to Luke's wife." For a moment I thought she might fight back, but I remained in the kitchen, listening as she retreated to her bedroom to gather her belongings. I still hadn't won, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally in the driver's seat. Luke was about to face his reckoning, and Mia had already left without saying goodbye or leaving a note. She had simply packed her bags and vanished without a trace the following morning. The house had a different vibe without her, almost empty, but that emptiness was preferable to the crushing weight of her lies. Now it was Luke's turn. I'd spent the night crafting a thoughtful email to his wife Christine, whom I recognized from his social media profile, a detail I'd saved when I initially began investigating him. She appeared to be the picture-perfect suburban. She had no clue what her husband had been up to, but that was about to change. In a simple but effective email, I attached photos and video from the clinic along with screenshots of Luke and Mallory's flirty emails. I didn't add commentary or embellishment. I just presented the facts. Before sending, I took one last look at the folder of incriminating files. This wasn't just. I hit send, and the fallout was immediate. Within an hour, Christine responded with a whirlwind of shock and gratitude. She hadn't seen it coming, and she thanked me for telling her the truth. I could almost hear the devastation in her words. The betrayal had cut her just as deeply as it had cut me. Unfortunately, I no longer felt sympathy for her, Luke, or anyone else. I saved that for later. That day, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, it was Luke. His voice was filled with panic as he asked if I was cleaning up a mess he had helped create. I cut him off and continued, my tone being that if he had slept with my wife, lied to his own family, and now he thinks he doesn't have the right to confront him about it, he should spare me. Luke remained silent for a moment, likely trying to come up with an excuse, but I didn't give him that chance. I wanted to make my point very clear, so I proceeded. "Luke, if you or Mallory ever attempt to approach me again, or even send me a text, I will make this matter public. I have more than enough power to ruin you, your wife, your job, and your perfect little life. So, unless you desire that, stay out of my way. You are a real scumbag." He spat, but there was no remaining anger in his voice. "No, Luke," I corrected him, saying, "My voice is steady. That's you. I'm simply the guy who won't let you get away with it." I ended the call before he could respond. feeling a surge of satisfaction wash over me. Luke may have thought he could. Mally and Luke attempted to destroy me, but in the end, they only succeeded in destroying themselves. I knew that there would be more fallout in the days to come, and that Mally might try to spin the story or that Luke might try damage control, but I sat on the back porch and stared at the yard that I had worked so hard to create, my anger still simmering beneath the surface. The days that followed were a whirlwind of aftermath. Christine, Luke's wife, sent me a final email that was short, direct, and filled with raw emotion. In it, she informed me that she was filing for divorce, thanked me for exposing the truth, and honestly expressed her hope that Mia and Luke got what they deserved. As for me, she attempted to reach out once, sending a single pitiful text asking if we could talk. I stared at the message for a long moment. Prior to deleting it, there was nothing left to say. I had severed all ties with her, and I had no intention of mending them. I wouldn't stand by and watch as she dealt with the fallout. I would rather she run to Luke or whatever rock she chose to hide behind. She was no longer an issue for me. The house became quiet and peaceful, and I started to focus on myself again, picking up my guitar and running in the mornings. I even reconnected with old friends who had always wondered why I had married someone like that. While organizing my office, I came across an old photo of Mallory and me from the early days of our marriage. We were smiling, carefree, and wrapped up in a version of love that felt a million miles away. I stared at it for a long moment before throwing it into the shredder. I threw out that chapter of my life because I wasn't the same person anymore and I had no intention of looking back. My acquaintances told me that Luke and Moeller's relationship didn't last. The spark they thought they had died down as they dealt with the guilt, shame, and destruction they had caused. After Christine aired their dirty laundry, Luke's reputation at work took a hit, and Moeller moved to a different city. If there's one thing I've learned from this, it's that betrayal doesn't just break you. It rebuilds you stronger and smarter than before. I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone, but if you're reading this and are struggling to decide whether to stay in a toxic relationship or fight for someone who doesn't value you, I urge you to hold your head up and let those who betray you drown in their own misery. There's nothing more satisfying than watching them crumble as you rise, and in some strange way, I'm grateful for that. It forced me to see things clearly, shed the dead weight, and prioritize myself for once.